In this video presentation, what I want to do is show you how to calculate consumer surplus from an equation, right? From the demand equation and the supply equation. Now, just remember, the same process that we calculated the consumer surplus utilizing the diagram by eyeballing it and realizing that it's the area below the demand curve and above equilibrium price, and knowing that also we can find the consumer surplus utilizing this formula, base by height divided by 2. It's the same process that we're going to do in a while. Just remember that the base is basically the equilibrium quantity. In this case, it's 5. That's the base of this triangle. So for each time we're going to calculate the base of the triangle in trying to determine consumer surplus for any product, the base that we're utilizing for the triangle will be the equilibrium price, whatever it will be in whatever example that you may be looking at. So the base in this triangle here is the equilibrium quantity of value of 5, and the height is the difference between the maximum price that the consumer is willing to pay and the equilibrium price of the product. In this case, is 20 minus 16, which gives us a value of 4. And that's why we have base 5, height 4, and consumer surplus 10. So moving on now, we have product A, and its demand is defined by this equation, QD equals 36 minus P. Q subscript D equals 36 minus P. The supply of this particular product is determined or expressed by the supply equation, which is QS is equal to minus 9 plus 2P. We know that at equilibrium, quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. So with these particular equations, there are many things that we could do. We could determine what demand would be when the price is a particular value. So we could have said if P is equal to 1, price being 1, then quantity demanded will be 35. So whenever the product A has a value of, a price of $1, it results in the quantity demanded of that product being 35 units, and so forth. And in this case here, if the price is $1, then price for the quantity supplied equation is going to be 2 by 1, which will be 2. Minus 9 plus 2 gives us negative 7. So we realize here that with a value of negative 7, how we can interpret that is that at a price of $1, the supplier is not willing to supply anything because you cannot supply the negative of a product. You can't supply negative 7 of a product. You can supply 7 units, but not negative 7. So we interpret the value negative 7 as being that the supplier is not willing to supply any products at the price $1. So understanding this, we move on. So the equilibrium price of product A can be determined by equating the demand equation and the supply equation. QD equals QS. If QD is 36 minus P, and QS is minus 9 plus 2P, then we simply get those two equations together, we equal them, and then we can work it out. You're going to move from this line to now this line. So we say 36 minus P equals minus 9 plus 2P. You carry across all the like terms, so you carry across the 9 by the 36. So when the minus 9 goes across the equal sign, we know that becomes plus 9. Minus P crosses the equal sign, becomes plus P. So it's going to be 36 plus 9 is equal to 2P plus P, which then gives you now, you work it out, 36 plus 9 is 45. 2P plus P is equal to 3P. And then to get what P will be, the equilibrium price, what P will be is simply, you simply say divide by 3 on both sides. When you divide by 3, you knock out the 3. 3 into 3 is 1, so you get P. And then 3 into 45 is 15. And we put the P star to indicate that this price is the equilibrium price. P star, in most textbooks you see P star represents the equilibrium price. So when we equate the two functions, we are able to determine what price would be, and we would say that that price is the equilibrium price because $15 is the unique price that results in the quantity demanded being equal to the quantity supplied of that particular product. So When P equals 15, as we said, quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Now, again, remember, if you're working out consumer surplus, you can remember, all right, if you recall, let me just go back a bit. You can see here in this diagram that it's important to know what price the consumer pays when they demand 1 unit, because 1 unit is simply the least that the consumer will be willing to purchase. And we know that consumers purchase more when the price decreases and they purchase less when the price increases. And the least of a product that a consumer could actually purchase is simply 1 unit. So therefore, whatever price is associated with that 1 unit, we can say that that is the maximum price that the consumer is willing to pay for that product. And getting that maximum price is important because the maximum price is that limit or that high value that we must now take and minus the equilibrium price for, so that we're able to determine the height of our triangle. So as we go through the process again utilizing the formulas, you would realize that what we're simply trying to do is figure out the values that we'll input in our equation here to calculate consumer surplus. Remember, calculating consumer surplus is simply the area of the triangle. It's going to be base by height divided by 2. And I said the base is the equilibrium quantity, the height is the maximum price is the difference between the maximum price that the consumer is willing to pay and the actual price which they pay, which is the equilibrium price. So it's going to be 20 minus 16, which gives you a value of 4 in this particular case. Moving back to our previous example with the calculations, it therefore means that if we have already determined what the equilibrium price is, for our equation to work, we need to know what is equilibrium quantity, and we also need to know what is the maximum price that the consumer will be willing to pay. And we know that the maximum price that the consumer is willing to pay for a product is associated with the least that the consumer will demand, which is actually 1 unit. So therefore, we're going to have to find out when the price is when quantity demanded, is equal to 1 unit, what is the associated price? So let's go through it one by one. When price is equal to 15, what is equilibrium quantity? So QD equals 36 minus P. That is a function for quantity demanded. And we simply substitute for P. So it's going to be 36 minus 15. And what we get is 21. So the equilibrium quantity demanded is 21, because that equilibrium quantity, which is 21 units, is that unique quantity that will clear or be equal to what consumers are willing to supply, because we know that equilibrium price is $15. So we have equilibrium price, we have equilibrium quantity. So the values for our formula are almost complete. What we need to find out now is what is the maximum price. So what value must P have that will result in quantity demanded being equal to 1? Well, we work it out. If QD is equal to 1, it means, because remember, QD equals 36 minus P. So if QD is equal to 1, it's going to be 1 equals 36 minus P. And then, if we carry across the 36 on this side, it's going to be 1 minus 36, which gives us minus 35. And then it's left with minus P. And we can simply multiply the entire equation by minus 1, which will make 35 positive and also P positive, which gives us 35 equals P. So when price is equal to $35, the consumer will demand only 1 unit. So we can infer that $35 is the maximum price that the consumer will pay for product A. So we have our values. We actually have our values, and we can now calculate consumer surplus. So remember, the formula is base by height divided by 2. Remember, we said the base will be our equilibrium quantity, and the height will be the maximum price minus the equilibrium price. And therefore, we have these things. We know that the equilibrium quantity here is 21. So therefore, our base is going to be 21. We know that the height is the difference between the maximum price and the equilibrium price. The maximum price is 35. Equilibrium price is 15. And therefore, 35 minus 15 gives us a value of 20. So we have our values. Base by height divided by 2 is 21 multiplied by 20 divided by 2 gives us a value of 210. So for a product that is defined by these equations, QD equals 36 minus P, QS equals minus 9 plus 2P, we can actually find consumer surplus by going through this simple process. And the goal is that we are simply looking for more or less three values: what the equilibrium price will be, what the equilibrium quantity would be, and what will be the maximum price that the consumer will be willing to pay. And when we're able to find these simple values, we can simply find out what B is and what H is, and then put the values into our formula and calculate consumer surplus. So I've just walked you through the process of calculating consumer surplus when you're not given a demand curve, but you're actually given the equations to express demand and supply. I hope the process was clear and understandable to all. Have a good evening or a good day. Thank you.